Welcome back to yet another episode of Ball with Y'all. It's so great to be here with you today on March 16th. We are firmly in the trenches of the month of March, which means we are only a few hours away from the beginning of March Madness, both on the women's and men's side. Of course, we've got a full show for you today, and we're so glad that you chose to join us, whether that's via Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Breaker, or if you're watching us on YouTube at BWY Productions. We are so glad to have you here today. As always, I encourage you, like, subscribe, rate, review, download, share with your friends. Do whatever you can to make sure that your friends and family know what content you are enjoying these days. And also, we encourage you, if you're checking us out on YouTube, I encourage you to also comment below so we know more of what you want to see and what you do not want to see as well. We are, I guess this is episode 9 here in season 2, and we are chugging along quite well. Like I mentioned, we have a full show for you today. We are just about to begin the NCAA tournament. We're going to focus on the men's side because that's really the only side I'm really familiar with. We're going to focus on that side, and then we'll go into a little bit of the NFL news this week, or I guess the last week or so. We had quarterbacks galore off the board, going different places, coming back to certain places. We'll go into that, some of our big takeaways there. And lastly, we'll go into what we saw this past Sunday in Phoenix with Chase Briscoe taking home his first win in the NASCAR Cup Series. And then also taking a look at the week ahead, particularly when it comes to Atlanta Motor Speedway. With that said, let's get into story number 1. So story number 1, we had a big weekend, particularly in the SEC with the SEC tournament. Now, of course, we know Tennessee, the number 2 seed in the SEC tournament, came away with the win. Big win for Tennessee, right? They took down Kentucky, right? Big win there. They took down, I believe they played South Carolina or Mississippi State in the second round there. And then, of course, they ended up taking down Texas A&M toward the end. A lot of momentum for that Tennessee team. I was kind of surprised, honestly, when I saw the main bracket came out and they were a 3rd seed. They were a 3 seed there. I kind of expected them to at least be a 2 seed after winning the SEC tournament and doing it pretty convincingly, right? They didn't really seem all that tested by Kentucky. They never even had the chance to play Auburn because, of course, we saw Texas A&M come from that other side of the bracket. A big momentum boost for the Volunteers. Now, we'll get into what I think will happen as far as these teams go. But I mentioned this at one point in time, I guess about a week ago, that this tournament always serves as a massive source of motivation, right? Last year, Alabama went in as the 1 seed, won as the 1 seed, took that momentum, got to the Sweet 16, I believe. I would not be surprised if this Tennessee team does exactly that. If they take this momentum and do something incredible as a result of their showing in the SEC tournament. We also saw teams like Arkansas and Kentucky. They were pretty impressive, right? I know also ultimately they didn't really get to the final matchup, but I believe they were both in the semis. I believe Arkansas played to Texas A&M, and then Kentucky played Tennessee. And Arkansas, they were pretty strong, right? They did exactly what I kind of expected them to do against LSU. And so on. And then as far as Kentucky goes, they didn't have to worry about playing Alabama. They got Vanderbilt, and they didn't worry too much about that Vanderbilt game. And then they got into the Tennessee game, and they didn't look all that great, but still a good showing for them nonetheless. It's okay when you lose to the conference champion. I said last week, I said that I thought whoever won the SEC tournament was going to come out of that region, was going to come out of that half of the bracket, whether it was going to be Kentucky or Tennessee, one of the two, they were going to win the tournament. And lo and behold, it ended up being the Volunteers. So a lot of credit to the Kentucky Wildcats nonetheless. I think they really deserved to be in that conversation. And I think they ultimately deserve that number 2 seed that they got in the NCAA tournament bracket on Sunday. Another team that really fell flat. Now, again, context. Going into last week, going into Wednesday, I said that I would love for Alabama to do incredible things in the SEC tournament and in the NCAA tournament, which we'll discuss that here in a moment. But I also said that I wouldn't be surprised if they struggled against the winner of Vanderbilt, Georgia, right? And of course, we know Vanderbilt just crushed Georgia, and then of course Georgia fired their head coach maybe a day or two later. And then of course Alabama has a pretty sizable lead, I would say, pretty sizable after the first half going into the second half. And then the wheels fall off. And then they realize they can just turn the ball over every play. And lo and behold, they lose to Vanderbilt. The 11 seed, they lose to Vanderbilt. I was incredibly disappointed, right? But also I wasn't really surprised. This Alabama team has hit the highest highs, and they've also been the lowest lows, right? And now they end the season on a 3-game losing streak against Texas A&M, LSU, and Vanderbilt. 3 solid teams, right? But you don't want to lose to those teams, right? We've talked about how they lost to Georgia, how they lost to Mississippi State. These are teams that you do not want to be losing to if you want to be considered as a national title contender. So pretty disappointing showing for the Alabama Crimson Tide. If you are a Crimson Tide fan, I guess the best hope you have is that hopefully they take this as motivation and start to turn the corner as a result. And then, of course, LSU, right? We talked about how they were for sure in the tournament, regardless of whatever happened in the SEC tournament. And, of course, they are in the tournament. I believe they're might be a 6th seed or so. I forget where they are exactly in the national tournament. But LSU, they looked really, really bad, right? They looked pretty good at first. They had a lead on Arkansas, and then the wheels fell off pretty quickly. Will Wade, he got a technical foul at some point in time late in the first half, and then the Arkansas Razorbacks did not look back at all. And then, of course, the next day, Will Wade, head coach for LSU, got fired, which is one of, I believe there are 6 different coaching changes in the SEC this past week, with Mike White leaving Florida for Georgia firing their head coach, Tom or Mike Crean, whatever his name is. And Mississippi State, their coach is gone. South Carolina, their coach is gone. LSU, their coach is gone. A litany of coaches off the board in the SEC, and LSU was no different, getting rid of Will Wade. Now, it wasn't really tied to the SEC tournament per se or the showing there. It has a lot to do with, if you recall, when they had those sanctions and those allegations back in 2019, talking about recruiting and so on. Really interesting timing on that decision there, but nonetheless, I understand them wanting to move forward as quickly as possible. Lastly, I do not understand how Texas A&M did not get in the NCAA tournament. Texas A&M, they beat. I forget who they beat in the first round. I want to say like a South Carolina or something along those lines. The first game they played. And then they played Auburn, right? And I thought, okay, well, Auburn's going to wipe them. Piece of cake. They trounced Auburn, right? Ultimately, Auburn kind of built back and they gave themselves a shot at the end, but it never really felt close, right? So they beat the number 1 seed and a number 2 seed at this point in time in the NCAA tournament. And then they advanced to play Arkansas, which a lot of us have a lot of expectation for Arkansas, which you'll hear more about here when it comes to my bracket picks in a second. And they trounced Arkansas. And okay, honestly, when I saw them beat Auburn, I was like, okay, they're definitely in. I knew they were kind of on the bubble come Thursday or Friday afternoon, right? It's like, okay, well, if they beat Auburn, they're definitely in. They beat Auburn. Okay, cool. I guess they're in. And then conversation was, well, okay, well, if they beat Arkansas, they are for sure in. Okay, sure, I guess fine. And then they beat Arkansas. I'm like, okay, well, now A&M is absolutely in the tournament. Absolutely. And then they go out there and, of course, lose to Tennessee, who ends up being, the tournament champion. Okay, whatever. But they're definitely going to be in the main bracket, the 64-team bracket. A&M misses out. I don't understand. Apparently, they were in the first 4 out, but I think they're better than Rutgers. I think they're better than Notre Dame. I think there are a lot of teams that kind of they were a little relieved to see Texas A&M not in the tournament because they gave Auburn all they wanted and more. They gave Tennessee I know Tennessee beat them. They gave Tennessee all they wanted and more. Arkansas, a team that we all really respect, at least in the circles that I keep. Arkansas is a really highly respected team, and yet A&M went out there after having a relatively lackluster season at some points in time. They beat Alabama a week and a half ago, right? They finished the season strong to end the regular season, and then they get in the SEC tournament, rattle off wins against Auburn and Arkansas, and give themselves a shot to win the SEC tournament as well. I think it's indefensible to keep Tennessee out of or to keep Texas A&M out of the tournament, but I imagine Aggie fans are they're familiar with being kept out of the tournament, if you will, when they were number 5 this past year or 2 years ago. But hey, I'll get off my soapbox there. Heading into the NCAA bracket, we have a few SEC teams in the bracket. While we didn't get Texas A&M, we do have Auburn as the number 2 seed, and in the Midwest, alongside LSU as the number 6 seed. In the South, we've got Tennessee as the number 3 seed. In the West region, we have Arkansas as the 4 seed and Alabama as the 6 seed. And lastly, in the East region, Kentucky, the Wildcats, are coming in as the number 2 seed. So which SEC team do I have going pretty far in the NCAA tournament? Well, I really really, really like Arkansas. And I know, I think I'm the same person that had Arkansas in my Final Four last year, and they got upset pretty early. I really like Arkansas this year, right? And I know I might get some flack for this, but I really, really think Arkansas could do some pretty incredible things this year. I like their matchups, particularly in the region that they're in, right? And I think they have a lot of potential to get past Gonzaga. They are in Gonzaga's region. Gonzaga's the number one overall. They're in the West region. It's going to be difficult to get past Gonzaga. But I think of any team in that region, the Arkansas Razorbacks can do it. I think they have a better shot to beat Gonzaga than Duke does. Duke is the number 2 seed in that NCAA region. I think Arkansas has a better shot to do it than does the Blue Devils of Duke. I think Auburn, they drew a favorable region, right, down there in the Midwest, but I don't really trust them away from home. Right? We talked about how they are undefeated at home, but they haven't really done all that well on the road. And as we saw in the SEC tournament, they're not really all that great on neutral sites either. I mean, they lost to UConn at one point in time earlier this season on a neutral site. So I don't really trust them in any of these neutral sites, regardless of the location that they are playing. And of course, as always, I mentioned this earlier, Alabama, they can play spoiler, right? I don't really know that I have too much expectation here for the Crimson Tide. They have a tough region. They are in the same region as Gonzaga and Arkansas and Duke, and they don't even know their first opponent right now, because tonight we got the round of 68, right, between I believe Notre Dame and a few other teams. And Notre Dame and Rutgers are the teams that are playing tonight, and the winner of that game goes against Alabama on Friday. And I think it's Indiana and another team, maybe Wyoming, if I remember correctly, in the first 4. So Alabama doesn't even know their first opponent yet in the NCAA tournament. But regardless of who they play, I would be surprised if they don't win the first game. If they beat the 11th, if they don't beat the 11th seed, I would be surprised. But I don't really know that they're going to go that far, because then I think they followed up with a tough matchup against a really highly ranked, I want to say a highly ranked 3 seed. I don't remember which 3 seed, Texas Tech, I want to say. So I don't have them going too far in my bracket. But again, this is the same team that beat Gonzaga, that beat Baylor, that beat Houston, that gave Auburn a run for their money at points in time. They could do it. I don't know if they'll do it, but they could. And they could play spoiler. So if you've been watching the Crimson Tide as of late and you have written them off of your bracket and you have them losing in the first round, I understand it. But also, don't be surprised if they'll go on a run and find themselves in the Sweet 16 come the end of this weekend, right? I'm not sure, but we'll see how it unfolds. As far as my Final Four for the NCAA tournament, I've got, coming from the West, I mentioned it earlier, the number 4 seeded Arkansas Razorbacks. From the East, I've got a little bit of a surprise here, right? It's not Baylor, right? It's not North Carolina. It's not Kentucky, right? There are a number of good teams down there in the East, but I've got St. Mary's, the 5 seed, coming out of the East region. Out of the Midwest region, I'm keeping it chalk, rock chalk, Jayhawk, Kansas. I got Kansas coming out of the Midwest region, the number 1 seed there. And lastly, the number 2 seed, Villanova Wildcats, coming out of the Southern region, which is the bracket that's got, I believe, Arizona and LSU and a couple that, no, LSU, Tennessee. I apologize. My championship game, I've got Kansas, the Kansas Jayhawks, beating Arkansas 76-71, winning the national championship, cutting down the nets, and so on. Now, I just gave you a brief look at my bracket. If you want to see it in entirety, we are setting up a group on ESPN's Tournament Challenge, and I'll put up the details in the description of the show here. So if you want to join the group and watch along as my bracket goes, how poorly my bracket does, if you want to compare your bracket to mine, feel free. We would love to get to see how well you're doing compared to myself, because I promise you that I will not be doing all that well. But hopefully I've struck gold with those 4, with Arkansas, St. Mary's, Kansas, and Villanova. Like I said, we'll have an ESPN Tournament Challenge link in the description if you want to check out our group on the Tournament Challenge page and follow the brackets along the way. But like I said, I've got Kansas coming out of this NCAA tournament over the next 2.5, 3 weeks. We'll see how it unfolds. On to story number 2. So story number 2, I was avoiding this topic for a while, right? And some of you might have thought, why isn't he talking about this particular person? And I addressed him at one point in time when I felt it was comfortable, when I was comfortable to do so. And I felt it was safe to do so. And then I haven't really talked about him for like 6 weeks. And here we are now, and I can finally talk about him, right? It reminded me, I think it was Tuesday of last week, so a little over a week ago. I sat there and I was reminded of the Alka-Seltzer commercial. And their slogan is, "Oh, what a relief it is," right? And when this news came out last Tuesday afternoon or so, oh, what a relief it was. Not only for the purposes of this show, the fact that I could talk about this topic on the show now, comfortably, not remotely concerned about the timing and whether I run into another Brady situation from about a month or so ago. I was very comfortable, not only on that front, but also, oh, what a relief it is, or was, given the fact that I don't know that I've mentioned this before, but I support this team. And the fact that my quarterback was coming back somewhat shockingly, oh, what a relief it was. So Green Bay, they locked up Aaron Rodgers with a record deal. I want to say it was $200 million over 4 years or something like that. It'll take him until he's like 42 or something. Absolutely absurd money there. Like I said, I did not think that he was going to come back to Green Bay. I think the last time I talked about Aaron Rodgers, I said that he was going to go to San Francisco. I want to say. I think I made the comparison about his fiance, who may not even be his fiance anymore. I don't think we really even know. His fiance being a Hollywood actress and so on. And I thought it made a lot of sense. Him being a California guy, he went to school in California. Thought it made a lot of sense. I also heard all the Denver Bronco, all those folks saying, "Oh, he's going to be a Bronco." I also heard the Tennessee Titans late in the game. Oh, that he can go to Nashville and he can play for the Titans. Well, we'll trade them. We'll go Ryan Tannehill over to Green Bay, and we'll send Aaron Rodgers down to Tennessee. And there were so many different points where I thought that was going to happen. That one of those many different situations, different scenarios were going to take place. After the 2020 season wrapped up, and it sounded like he was a little discontent, right? I'm going to say it was around April or so of last year. I did not see him starting the 2021 season in a Green Bay jersey. And then he did. And I was like, okay, well, this is one last ride. Much like Michael Jordan and the 96 Chicago Bulls, one more ride to go win a championship. And then when he falls flat in the first game for the Packers in the divisional round against San Francisco because his special teams doesn't know how to play football, I was like, okay, well, that's it. No more Aaron Rodgers, right? It was a fun 14 or so years. I don't know how long he was with the Packers. A long time. Fun ride, right? Kind of broke my heart a little bit, but I knew it was time, right? And I was fully prepared for whatever Jordan Love was going to bring to the Green Bay organization. But instead, oh, what a relief it was. Aaron Rodgers back in a Green Bay jersey, not only for this year or the following year, but for 4 years. Oh, it was such an incredible feeling. It was also an incredible feeling if you are a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan on Sunday night. Now, time and time again, talking about Tom Brady, I said that he was not done. I said that he was going to come out of retirement. I compared him to Michael Jordan and the fact that he retired multiple times. And I said I would be surprised if Tom Brady does not come back to the NFL. Now, granted, I said he would take a year off. I said that he would look at the whole landscape and he'd say, I can still do that. I can still do that thing right there. I can do it better than he can. Tom Brady waited 40 days, just 40 days before coming back to football. It was a big announcement Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Just like we predicted, Tom is back. Guess who's back? Back again. And, it was a lot sooner than we expected, right? So what really brought him back? I know we heard this whole undying competitive spirit, right? I don't really know what that means in this context. I don't really know if that actually is the case or if he's just using that as a cover. I think there were a couple things, right? I think he probably sat back and said, wow, my life without football is terrible. Okay, I get that. I understand it. But also, they franchise tagged Chris Godwin, right? Wide receiver, right? So they still have him. Mike Evans, he's still going to be out there as a wide receiver for the Buccaneers. Leonard Fournette, if they can get him back, make sure he's all squared away. Gronkowski, there was a point in time where Tom Brady did not think he was going to have any weapons. And like I mentioned, when he identified this was going to be a bit of a rebuild year, he said, I'm done. I'm not doing that again. I did it in New England for however long, and I still won them Super Bowls. I am not doing this by myself anymore. And then they get him some weapons and secure him some pieces. And look at that. He's back 40 days later. Now, you have to imagine Tampa's going to take a little bit of a step back due to the rebuild, due to the roster turnover. But obviously, when you have Tom under center, he will keep them in the hunt. So if you are a Tampa Bay Buccaneer fan, for you especially, oh, what a relief it was. On to the AFC West, however, where a big piece of news. It was kind of surprising because I really wasn't expecting it. You know, Russell Wilson for a long time has been a Seattle Seahawk. And I think whenever I think of Russell Wilson, I always envision him in a Seattle Seahawk jersey for the plays that he made as a Seattle Seahawk, for the moments that he had as a Seattle Seahawk, right? And now he's no longer a Seahawk. He's in Denver. He's in Denver, right? Denver, Colorado. He's a Denver Bronco. And just when you thought the AFC West could not get any tougher, here we are, right? You've got Patrick Mahomes for the Kansas City Chiefs. You've got Russell Wilson now for the Denver Broncos. You've got Justin Herbert for the Los Angeles Chargers. And you've got Derek Carr for the Las Vegas Raiders. Just when you thought things could not be any more difficult for these AFC West defenses, they just got so much more difficult. So prayers up for those AFC West defenses. Well, maybe not Los Angeles. Of course, they have Joey Bosa, and they also locked up Khalil Mack a week ago as well. So maybe Los Angeles' defense might be okay, but everybody else, just get ready because it's going to be a long, long season for those AFC West defenses. As far as the immediate impact that Russell Wilson will have, they're already a playoff contender. Just the fact that Russell Wilson is in the building alone, right? They have weapons across the board. I know they lost Noah Fant as a part of the trade, but a number of high-quality receivers across the board there. And their defense had been their calling card this most recent season as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Denver can make a run for their division this season. And to that extent, I also not be surprised if very quickly, because of some of the roster turnover that's coming, if Kansas City all of a sudden becomes the third best team in their division. And we'll see how that unfolds. But I think there's a lot of intriguing elements to this that could unfold here in the next couple of seasons. And lastly, of course, we saw Carson Wentz went to Washington, the Washington Commanders. And, you have to imagine if you're a Commanders fan, you probably hoped for a bigger name to start off your new season, your first season with your new name. And instead you got a guy who's just as uninspiring as your name is, right? Commanders doesn't really inspire anything, nor does Carson Wentz. So that's not really all that great. I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully it pans out well for them. But especially when you're in the NFC East with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones makes your life difficult. But Dak Prescott, Jalen Hurts, it's going to be a tough ride for Carson Wentz and the Commanders this season, I imagine. Now, the offseason, it always has some element of drama and some wild headlines. I know we still have some more guys signing and so on. But I'd like to think that this is our moment where we can take a step back from the NFL, right, until the draft takes place in late April. But I think now that Rodgers is in place and that Brady is in place and that Wilson is in place and Wentz and a number of these other receivers and so on, I think now we can kind of take a step back and reassess and identify where we are going as far as the forthcoming season goes. But I'd like to think that some of our headlines are going to die down here in the short term. On to story number 3. So story number 3, this is more looking ahead, right? I don't really have a whole lot to say about this race this past Sunday, but Chase Briscoe, his first ever win in a Cup Series, in the Cup Series for that matter, driving the 14 for Stewart-Haas Racing, beating, I believe, Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain down in Phoenix, right? An incredible moment for him. He got his first career win at this level, like I mentioned, the 200th different Cup Series winner at this level. An incredible achievement for him. A lot of people were wondering as to who that 200 driver would be. Of course, we know Austin Cindric was the 199th different Cup driver back in Daytona, and we didn't know who the 200th would be. Well, all of a sudden it became Chase Briscoe. Now he's also the first time that a Stewart-Haas number 14 car is in victory lane since 2018. And Chase Briscoe, he's also the second first-time winner of the season, like I mentioned, with Austin Cindric, and also the third time in the last 10 races that we've had a first-time winner. Now, I thought that Ryan Blaney or that Chase Elliott would win this race. I thought they had it in the bag. Ryan Blaney, he led what felt like most of the race. Even when he had an issue with a speeding penalty, still got right back up there and led the race for what felt like forever. And then finally, Chase Elliott, right? I'm getting giddy just watching this. I think, okay, this is the moment. Chase is going to do it. Chase is going to do it. Chase is going to get the lead, and he's going to win this race. He's going to win on an oval. It's not going to be a road course. It's not going to be some weird track where he wins based off of a circumstance or based off of a technicality. He's going to win this race. Chase Elliott is going to do it. And then you get closer to the end, and one thing leads to another, and then there's a caution and a restart, and then Chase Briscoe beats Chase Elliott off the line, right? And I was like, okay, well, Chase Elliott's a more experienced driver. He'll get him back, right? He's got a lot of time here. He'll get him back. And he almost did a couple of times, but he didn't quite get there. He did not quite get there. And then, of course, there's a caution. I believe it was Eric Jones, I want to say, ended up in the wall or something along those lines. And then the fateful pit stop. Chase Briscoe gets right out there, keeps his first spot. Blaney falls back a little bit. Chase Elliott falls back to like 7th or something along those lines. And the rest was pretty much history. You saw Tyler Reddick fighting for the win there at the end. You saw Ross Chastain, all three of them looking for their first ever Cup Series wins. And they fell just short behind Chase Briscoe. And ultimately speaking, there's some really interesting themes that are coming out of this NASCAR season so far. A lot of your usual suspects, of course, you had Kyle Larson win once back in Fontana. You had Alex Bowman win on accident, I guess you would say, if you will, in Vegas a couple weeks ago. You're not really seeing the common characters at the front come the end of the race, right? And I know Kevin Harvick, he had a shot toward the end, but Kyle Busch isn't finishing races well. Denny Hamlin is not finishing races well. Martin Truex Jr. is not finishing races well. In fact, let me just point out something about those three drivers. They are all Toyota drivers, right? Toyota had a terrible day yesterday. They have 6 drivers out there between Christopher Bell and Bubba Wallace and Kurt Busch and Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. And with the exception, I know technically Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch, they finished in the top 10 ultimately. That was kind of more so that I really felt like a misrepresentation of how the day actually went for Toyotas. But ultimately, Toyotas, they were pretty much out of the top 10 most of the day. In fact, Martin Truex Jr., he didn't finish the race. Denny Hamlin did not have a good race. Christopher Bell did not have a good race. And it really just felt like a bad situation all across the board for Toyota, let alone this is 2 weeks after when all the cars were overheating, right? There was something going on with the front of those cars, and they could not keep those cars cool. And you don't want that because you don't want the cars blowing up on the track, right? Understandably so. So I don't know what's happening in the Toyota camp right now. I don't know what's happening for the Gibbs folks. I don't know what's happening for 2311 Racing with Denny Hamlin and Bubba Wallace and Kurt Busch. But one thing that's really interesting about this season in particular, 2 drivers who made the playoffs last year who are outside the top 20 right now in points, Christopher Bell and Denny Hamlin. I'm not so worried about Christopher Bell. He kind of got into the playoffs last year by chance, by accident, it felt like. But Denny Hamlin, you would have thought by now that he would have had a win. I know, I get it. He didn't win at all last year in the regular season. I know, right? But you feel like it's almost the witching hour at this point. He needs to get a win under his belt. He needs to get some momentum. He doesn't necessarily have to win, but he needs to get a top 10, a top 5. And Denny Hamlin has not had a good season this year. And it makes you wonder, this might be a little premature, but it makes you wonder what he might do from a career standpoint if he does not have a good season. If he just barely gets in the playoffs, or if he misses the playoffs, what does he do? He could retire. He could go the Brad Keselowski route and go run for 2311 and go run for his own team. There are a number of different directions that he could go. And I would not be surprised just based on the way that he's had, just based on the season alone that he's had so far. Now, again, I don't want to get too premature and get too much into speculation, although I love speculation. But I don't want to get too far into that right now, but it's something to keep an eye on nonetheless. On to the Atlanta side of things. This week, we are going to Atlanta Motor Speedway, of course, in Atlanta, Georgia. And it should be a fun race. Last year, Ryan Blaney, he won the spring race at this track. Since February 2019, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and Ryan Blaney, they all have 3 top 5s in 4 starts, whereas Kevin Harvick, Alex Bowman, and Denny Hamlin both have, or all 3 of those guys have 2 top 5s in 4 starts. So I would say those are my top 6 guys as far as folks you would expect to win between Busch and Truex and Blaney and Harvick, Bowman, and Hamlin. Of course, Larson's probably going to be up there. Chase Elliott might be up there. He hasn't historically done all that well at Atlanta, even though he's from Georgia. He hasn't done really all that well at Atlanta, but we'll see how he does. So of all those guys, who do we like the most? Now, it's going to be a little redundant, if you will, and it might come across as a little bit of a front runner mindset, but I really like Ryan Blaney. I know he won in the spring last year, but I don't think it really applies right now. What I'm more so focused on is the fact that he was really close a week ago. He almost won Daytona in the first week of the season if he wasn't so helpful for his teammate Austin Cindric. He has been so close throughout the season. And you can tell he has a lot of speed in that Penske, I think it's Menard's number 12 car. I think he could do it. And I think this could be the track. He's done well at this track before. His average finish in 7 races at Atlanta is 12th. So he's usually up in that ballpark. If he's not leading, he's somewhere close to the lead. Like I said, he won the spring race last year, and I expect Penske to get back on the board here in the form of Ryan Blaney taking them to the finish line. And that will do it for today's episode. Now, we have a lot of fun things here in the next week and a half or so with the NCAA tournament. Like I said, if you'd like to follow along with our bracket, feel free to check out the information in the description to join our group on ESPN's Tournament Challenge page. I want to thank you again for tuning in today and for giving us a little bit of your time, whether it's the Wednesday morning for you, Wednesday afternoon, or Wednesday evening. I know that your time is valuable, and I appreciate you giving us just a sliver of that to talk about some sports and all the news that are hitting the sports world right now. Now, I encourage you to check us out on Instagram at Ball With Y'all Podcast. If you want more information about some things that are happening in the sports world and some more analysis throughout the week, I promise you that we have a lot of important things that are happening beyond Wednesdays, and that's the best way to get in contact with us. So, like I said, I really appreciate you tuning in today, and hopefully you get to join us here in the coming weeks, and I hope you enjoy the NCAA tournament as well. So one last time, thank you for tuning in today, and thank you for allowing us to talk some ball with you.